Listen closely, because what I'm about to reveal was whispered only among the dying, and even they spoke it with trembling lips. Ironcross Road is not a legend. It is a warning carved into the bones of history itself. And tonight, you will understand why men once believed the rain could choose who lived and who would not see another dawn. Imagine the year 1883, late November, when the world feels thin, like the veil between life and death has been stretched too tightly. Greyford was a quiet frontier town then, built with rough hands and fearful hearts. Nights were long, oil lamps flickered like shivering souls, and the forest surrounding the town seemed to breathe. But there was one place no man crossed willingly, a narrow, crooked path where an old iron cross stood half-buried in the soil. Locals called it Ironcross Road. Outsiders laughed at the name, until they saw the rain. It never rained normally there, not like the sky meant to water the earth. The rain fell like judgment, thin, silver, precise. And it didn't fall on the road, or the trees, or the fields. It fell only on names. Every time someone in Greyford was marked for death, whether by fate, sin, or some ancient debt, thin streams of rain appeared above Ironcross Road, falling onto a single patch of dirt. And slowly, painfully slowly, a name would rise from the mud, not written by hand, not carved by tool. The soil itself pushed the letters upward, as if something buried deep beneath the ground was trying to speak, or to warn. People tried to ignore it. They pretended it was superstition. But after the 15th death, when a man was found with his eyes open, mouth filled with mud as if he had been silenced by the earth, Greyford stopped pretending. They understood that the rain did not fall from clouds. It fell from something else. Something old. Something waiting. And here's the part no historian will ever tell you. The rain didn't choose names randomly. Every man marked carried a secret, one they believed was theirs alone. But Ironcross Road knew. And it punished. Before we continue deeper into this forbidden truth, I need one thing from you. Now write in the comments which city and what time you are listening to us from, so we know who is absorbing this secret. Before we go any deeper, you need to understand the world in which this horror was born. Ironcross Road didn't exist in isolation. It was the rotten tooth in a mouth already filled with decay. Greyford in the 1880s looked peaceful from the outside. Small wooden houses, smoke rising gently from chimneys, children chasing chickens in dusty yards. But beneath that simplicity lay a tension thick enough to suffocate the honest man and feed the wicked one. The town had grown on secrets. Everyone carried one. Some harmless, some poisonous, and some so dark that the earth itself seemed to recoil when those men walked by. Most towns in the frontier feared wolves, criminals, or winter. But Greyford feared silence, because silence meant the rain was coming. Every man who woke before dawn felt it, the strange heaviness in the air, like breath held by an unseen presence. Even the weather felt unnatural. Clouds drifted in impossible patterns, forming sharp shapes that vanished the moment anyone stared too long. Old farmers claimed the wind changed direction around Ironcross Road. Others swore their lanterns dimmed whenever they approached its boundary. And yet no one left Greyford. They were bound by something older than family and stronger than fear. Late at night, when the world turned blue and still, strange noises echoed through the town. Soft tapping, like fingernails on wood. A low hum, like a heartbeat deep underground. Sometimes a whisper, too soft to understand, too clear to ignore. Men pretended not to hear. Women pulled their children closer. And the sheriff, a man who had seen bodies torn by bare claws and men torn by their own sins, refused to walk outside after midnight. One thing terrified the townspeople more than anything, the way the world changed when a man was about to be mocked. Dogs refused to bark. Horses froze in place, ears stiff, eyes trembling. Lamps flickered even without wind. And for a few seconds, everything, every sound, every breath, fell into a silence so profound it felt like the world had stopped listening. That was when people knew the rain would fall soon. Somewhere, somehow, another name was about to rise from the date of Ironcross Road. And if you feel ready to take the next step and become part of this journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. But to truly understand the terror of Ironcross Road, you must know the people whose lives were swallowed by it. Every dark legend begins with a face, a family, a soul that should have lived an ordinary life but was dragged into something older than blood. And in Greyford, that face belonged to Elias Marrow. Elias wasn't a villain, nor a saint. He was a quiet blacksmith, broad-shouldered, soot-stained, the kind of man who spoke rarely but carried a strange heaviness in his eyes. People said he could hammer iron into any shape except a smile. His wife had died 2 winters earlier, leaving him alone with a daughter, little Clara, whose silence matched her father's. But unlike Elias, Clara wasn't silent because of grief. She was silent because she seemed to hear things others couldn't. She would stop in the middle of a sentence, tilt her head, and whisper, "It's listening." Sometimes she'd stand at the window at night, staring toward Ironcross Road as if answering a call. Once, when a neighbor asked what she was looking at, Clara simply said, "The ground is hungry tonight." The next morning, that neighbor's name appeared beneath the falling rain. Elias tried everything to protect her. He moved her bed away from the window. He barred the doors. He burned incense the way his wife used to. But nothing stopped Clara from waking at strange hours, sweat on her small forehead, murmuring fragments of phrases no child should speak. It wants a debt paid. It chooses. It remembers. People in town avoided the Marrow family, not out of hate but fear. They said the girl walked with the shadow of Ironcross Road clinging to her heels. Others believed she carried a curse placed long before her birth. A curse her mother knew about. A curse Elias secretly feared. What they didn't know, what Elias never confessed, was that his wife's final words on her deathbed were not about love, but warning. "Keep her away from the road," she whispered. "The rain knows her name." And Elias, a man who feared nothing, not death, not fire, not God, felt something cold press against his spine when she said it. Something ancient. Something waiting. He didn't know then that Clara Marrow would become the reason Ironcross Road awakened deeper than ever before, and that the next name the earth would carve might not belong to a stranger. The night everything changed for the Marrow family began quietly. Too quietly for a town that usually groaned and breathed like an old beast in its sleep. Elias had been working late in his forge, pounding hot metal into shape, trying to distract himself from the uneasy feeling crawling under his skin. The air outside felt unnaturally still, thick, as if each breath had weight. Even the flames in his furnace swayed as though listening for something approaching. Elias tried to ignore it, but his instincts, honed through years of surviving storms, violence, and heartbreak, told him the silence wasn't natural. It was expectant. When he finally stepped out into the cold night, wiping sweat and soot from his face, he saw Clara standing at the edge of the yard. Her small figure looked frozen, her nightdress fluttering without wind, her bare feet sunk slightly into the earth as if the ground was claiming her inch by inch. Elias called to her, voice trembling despite his size, but she didn't turn. She was staring toward Ironcross Road, that cursed path half a mile away, as if something invisible connected her to it. He approached slowly, afraid of what she might say. Whenever Clara spoke at night, truth followed, and truth in Greyford was rarely merciful. When he reached her, she finally whispered, "It's waking again." Elias felt a chill stab his spine. He knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders gently and forcing her to face him. Her eyes were wide, too wide for a child, and glittered with a terror she barely understood. "What do you hear?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. Clara inhaled shakily. "The soil is breathing. Someone's name is trying to come up." Elias froze. He had heard those words before, from his dying wife. He felt dread clutch his chest, squeezing his lungs until he could barely speak. "Whose name?" he whispered. Clara's lips trembled. She lifted one small hand and pointed not toward Ironcross Road, but toward their own house. Elias felt the world tilt beneath him. His throat tightened. He carried Clara inside, bolting every door, every window, though he knew wood and locks meant nothing to whatever force ruled that cursed road. That night, while the air outside thickened like wet wool, Clara whispered the words Elias feared most. "It's choosing someone, and this time, it's close." The storm that arrived over Greyford that night was not a storm in any natural sense. Clouds formed too low, too fast, black as iron, and the wind carried whispers that no human mouth had ever shaped. Even the oldest trees trembled in their roots, leaves rattling like skeletons. Every man who had ventured near Ironcross Road swore the air thickened, almost sentient, as if it had been waiting for decades for this exact moment. And for Elias Marrow, nothing in all his years of toil and fear could have prepared him. By midnight, rain began falling, thin, deliberate, silver, but not across the town. Not on rooftops or the cobblestones of the square. It fell only along a small stretch of Ironcross Road, arcing toward a single patch of date behind the Marrow House. Elias saw it from his window, each drop shining like molten glass as it traced a path toward the earth. And then the impossible happened. The soil stayed. It writhed subtly, almost like a heartbeat beneath the surface. Letters began to rise, forced upward from below the mud. The name appeared, letter by letter, carved by forces unseen, precise, deliberate, terrifying. Elias felt the weight of generations pressing down on him. The name was his neighbor's, then another. And Clara whispered from the corner of the room, voice trembling, "It remembers their debts, it remembers their sins." She had spoken in riddles before, but now every word struck like a blade, each syllable a judgment. Outside, the wind carried the sound of faint scratching, as if fingers, or claws, were clawing at the wooden walls of Greyford itself. Horses in barns whinnied in terror. Dogs howled but stopped mid-cry. Lamps guttered and dimmed. Time itself seemed to stutter, caught between breath and silence. Elias, for the first time in his life, felt powerless. He wanted to flee, to take Clara and run into the blackened forest, but instinct and love held him rooted. He understood something men of his world would never comprehend. Ironcross Road didn't simply punish. It watched. It chose. And it never forgave mistakes, nor mercy. By the early hours of morning, the first body was found. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open, fingers clawed into earth as if begging for another chance. And Elias knew, with bone-deep certainty, that this was only the beginning. Greyford had awakened a force older than law, older than faith. And once it remembered, it would never rest. The town of Greyford had never felt smaller than it did that morning. The first body had been discovered near the edge of Ironcross Road, mud still clinging to its lifeless fingers, eyes wide as if staring into something the living could not see. The sheriff, a man who had spent decades enforcing law in the harshest of frontos, refused to speak. He merely nodded, a trembling acknowledgement that the road had chosen again, that whatever governed Ironcross Road was beyond judgment or punishment. Elias Marrow carried Clara inside, cradling her small frame as the whispers of the town began to rise. Neighbors gathered silently, pale-faced, their eyes darting toward the cursed path. No one dared approach the patch of soil where the silver rain fell in deliberate arcs, leaving behind letters formed by some unnatural force. The name of the deceased was still fresh in the mud, a grotesque testament to the power the road wielded. It was then that the air shifted. A strange pressure settled over the town, heavy, suffocating, as if the entire forest surrounding Greyford were pressing inward. Windows rattled on their frames. Doors shuttered though no wind touched them. Horses refused to move. Dogs whimpered, ears pinned, bodies trembling. Every living creature seemed to sense the presence of something older, something patient, something that did not belong to the world of men. Clara, eyes wide and unblinking, whispered again, "It is hungry tonight. The next name wants to rise." Her words fell like a death sentence in the silent street. Elias felt his blood freeze, the hammering of his heart drowned by a deafening stillness. The blacksmith who had once faced fire, steel, and storms without fear now realized he had been naive. He had never faced anything like Ironcross Road. The townspeople began to murmur of debts, sins, and secrets that had been buried for generations. Old men remembered faces long gone. Women remembered hushed warnings from their mothers. Every household had something, and the road remembered. Every step on its crooked path was a judgment, and the rain, impossibly selective, fell only where it had been commanded to fall. Elias understood, then, a truth that would haunt him forever. The road did not merely kill. It revealed. It exposed hidden guilt, unspoken crimes, the sins of the living etched into the soil for the world to witness. And as the silver rain continued to fall, he knew this was far from over. Elias could not sleep that night, though. Exhaustion weighed on him like iron. Clara lay in the corner of their room, wide-eyed, muttering fragments of words he did not understand, words that seemed to crawl off her tongue like insects skittering through the dark. Each syllable carried a weight that was older than Greyford, older than sin itself. He kept the doors locked, the windows barred, yet he could feel the pull of Ironcross Road, a force that no widow iron could resist. It was patient, meticulous, and it knew the truth of every heartbeat in the town. At midnight, he finally could no longer ignore the sound. A soft tapping, almost imperceptible, came from outside. Tap, tap, tap. Each echo in the silence of Greyford seemed amplified, stretching into eternity. He approached the window cautiously. Beyond the faint glow of lanterns, the date patch along Ironcross Road shimmered faintly under the silver rain. Something moved beneath it, subtle but deliberate, pushing letters up through the mud. A name. Another name. A warning or a sentence. Elias could not tell. Clara's whisper broke through the darkness. "It wants to speak to you now." He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold wind. She was right. This was not about the other townspeople anymore. The road had begun to mock him, and with it, the truth he had tried to bury all his life. The sins, the choices, the debts owed, were clawing their way to the surface. He remembered the stories the old men spoke of in hushed tones. Men vanishing without trace, discovered days later in positions unnatural, fingers clawed into earth, eyes wide with visions they could not share. Men whose names had appeared under the silver rain were not always the guilty ones, but the road's judgment was not about fairness. It was about revelation. The secrets people kept, the lies they told themselves, the darkness they ignored, they all fed Ironcross Road. And Elias realized that in Greyford, no secret remained buried. By the early hours, the tapping stopped. The letters in the mud had finished their slow, grotesque ascent. The rain had ceased, leaving the ground glistening like silver veins carved into the heart of the earth. Elias stared at the patch of date, dread coiling in his stomach. He knew he could not run, could not hide, and could not pretend anymore. The road had chosen its next target, and it had begun with him. He turned to Clara, who only stared at him, expression blank but knowing. In that moment, he understood something terrifying. Ironcross Road was not a place of chance. It was a force. And once it touched a family, it demanded attention, obedience, and revelation. The following morning Greyford awoke to a quiet it had not known before. Not the calm of peace, but the weight of anticipation, the eerie silence that presses on your chest and makes your own breath sound like a threat. Doors remained shut. Windows were shuttered. Children didn't play. Even the birds seemed to hesitate in their flight, pausing mid-air as if sensing that something older than any living thing had claimed the town as its own. Elias stepped outside, boots sinking into the damp earth of his yard. The patch along Ironcross Road, still glistening with the silver rain, seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. He reached toward it instinctively, but something invisible forced his hand back. It wasn't solid. It wasn't wind. It was the presence of judgment itself, waiting, patient, intelligent. It had a mind beyond man's comprehension. He had heard stories of men in Greyford vanishing without warning, bodies discovered days later with fingers clawing at the ground, eyes wide with terror. And he knew now that all of those events had been rehearsals, warnings for what was about to unfold. Clara remained silent, standing by the edge of the porch, staring at the road. "It's not finished," she murmured, her small hand tracing invisible lines in the air. "It wants more. It is hungry for names, and for the truth behind them." Elias felt the weight of every secret he had carried, every lie he had ever told himself, pressing against his skull. Ironcross Road did not punish random sins. It revealed the hidden, the buried, the unspoken, the things men convinced themselves were safe. And the earth obeyed it like a devoted servant, rising to expose names that should have remained hidden forever. He walked cautiously toward the cursed path, every step echoing in the hollow silence of the morning. The silver rain had ceased, but the mud still trembled faintly under his boots. And then he saw it, letters forming slowly in the soft earth. Not just any letters, but his own name. Elias froze, heart pounding. The road had chosen. It had remembered every small act, every secret, every hidden debt he thought long buried. From the forest behind him came a faint tapping. Not wind, not animal. Something deliberate and slow. It was calling. Not threatening, not yelling, not moving fast, just waiting. Patient, intent. And in that moment, Elias realized the full truth. Ironcross Road was more than a path. It was a ledger, an ancient judge, and every person who walked near it was a page waiting to be written. The townspeople whispered among themselves, glancing at the Marrow house with fear in their eyes. No one dared approach, and yet everyone knew that the next act of judgment was inevitable. And for Elias, for Clara, for Greyford itself, there was no escape. Night fell over Greyford like a heavy, suffocating shroud. The clouds were thick, black, and low, swallowing the last traces of sunlight. Not a star dared shine, and the wind carried a damp, metallic scent, as if the town itself were bleeding secrets into the air. Elias sat beside the fireplace, hammering thoughts into a rhythm he hoped would calm his mind. But the metal under his hands could not mask the terror that clung to the house like smoke. Clara's eyes reflected the flickering flames, wide, unblinking, as if she could see through the walls, into the road, into the soil where the silver rain had fallen. She whispered fragments of phrases again, words that clawed at the edges of understanding. They remember, they never forget, it is waiting for the debt to be paid. Elias could feel the words, heavy as stones, pressing into his chest. He had tried to protect her, shield her from the road's judgment, but now he understood it was pointless. The road did not negotiate. It did not bargain. It demanded obedience, and it remembered every lie, every secret, every hidden transgression. At the stroke of midnight, a faint tapping began outside. Not wind, not rain, not human footsteps. Something deliberate, slow, like fingernails tracing lines in the mud. Elias drew a deep breath, the cold fire of dread filling his lungs. He approached the window and saw the patch of dirt shimmering faintly, silver rain appearing once more, though the sky above was clay. It fell only on the spot where a name had yet to rise. The mud pulsed, and slowly, letters pushed upward, forming shapes that his mind refused to recognize. Clara stepped forward, small fingers brushing the sill. It is choosing again. Another name. The words froze in his mind. He realized the road did not stop at one. Its judgment was a tide. Once awakened, it flowed endlessly, claiming, revealing, punishing. Every household in Greyford, every hidden act of betrayal or greed, every secret thought. Now it all became visible to the road, carved into the earth by forces no human could control. Elias's heart pounded in his ears. He could feel the pull, the inevitability. Ironcross Road had remembered his own sins, the small acts of selfishness he had long buried, and it was only a matter of time before his name would appear. And the road would not wait. Outside, the wind seemed to carry whispers from centuries past, voices of men and women who had vanished, names carved into mud long since dried, debts long unpaid. And Elias understood the truth the town had refused to acknowledge. Ironcross Road was more than a cursed path. It was an instrument of revelation, a force older than law, older than God, older than humanity itself. And tonight, it was hungry once again. The town of Greyford slept uneasily that night. If sleep could even describe the trembling, half-conscious state of men and women aware that something older than themselves roamed the earth. Elias Marrow remained awake, seated at the edge of the fireplace, staring at the shadows twisting across the walls. He could hear the subtle creak of the house settling, or perhaps it was something else moving just beyond the threshold. Clara slept fitfully in the corner, murmuring words no child should ever speak, her small fists clenched around the blanket as if trying to hold the world together. Outside, Ironcross Road waited. The air along its crooked path had grown thicker, almost viscous, each breath a struggle. The date, still damp from earlier rain, began to shimmer faintly as if alive. Elias understood now what the old stories had tried to warn him about. The road did not choose randomly. It measured, remembered, judged. Each raindrop carried the weight of names, debts, sins, and secrets that the living believed were safely hidden. And now it had returned to claim more. At exactly midnight, the faint tapping began, slow, deliberate, coming from the direction of the cursed path. It was impossible to locate. Sometimes it seemed a footstep away, sometimes on the other side of town, yet always present, always moving closer. Elias felt it inside his chest, deep and hollow, a force pressing into his bones. The letters in the mud began to rise again. One by one, they pushed up from the earth, forming names that made his stomach turn. Names of men he had known, men who had smiled at him in the marketplace, yet carried dark secrets he had never imagined. Clara whispered, voice trembling, "It knows them, it remembers everything, it sees everything hidden." Elias nodded slowly, understanding fully now that the road did not punish ignorance, it punished concealment. Any lie, any betrayal, any secrets buried in darkness would surface eventually, revealed in the silver rain, carved in mud, and claimed by whatever ancient force governed Ironcross Road. He thought of the town's history, the vanished families, the bodies discovered with eyes wide open, fingers clawing at the earth, faces frozen in terror. Every disappearance, every unexplained death, was part of the ledger. And the ledger was alive. It grew, it waited, and it fed. The road was patient, immortal, and relentless. Elias knew then that his own name would eventually rise from the soil. He knew there would be no escape for him, no hiding, no bargaining. And yet, as he stared out at the dark road, he felt a grim clarity. To survive, or even merely to witness, the truth of Ironcross Road, one must accept it entirely, see the world as it truly is, and understand that knowledge is heavier than life itself. The following days brought no relief, only the oppressive certainty that Ironcross Road was awakening further, drawing the town into its ancient memory. Greyford's streets, once quiet, now carried the weight of hushed voices, trembling lips, and glances that darted toward the cursed path as though expecting the earth itself to rise and claim them. Every house had secrets, and every secret was now a target. The silver rain no longer fell only at night. It appeared at the edges of shadows, reflecting faint light on the date-like cold, deliberate judgment. Elias walked the road cautiously, every step a negotiation with fear itself. The mud under his boots pulsed faintly, sending shivers up his spine. The letters of names still glimmered faintly, waiting for the next moment to emerge. He had begun to understand the pattern. The road did not merely punish. It measured. It remembered. And the longer a sin remained hidden, the heavier its judgment. He thought of the men in town, each hiding misdeeds they believed insignificant, and he realized the ledger of the road was growing faster than he could comprehend. Clara remained unusually quiet during these days, her gaze often fixed toward the horizon where Ironcross Road disappeared into the dark forest. When Elias asked her what she saw, she whispered words that would haunt him forever. It knows the next ones, and it calls them before the rain appears. He shivered at the precision of her insight, understanding that this child, this small, silent girl, was attuned to the road in ways even he could not yet grasp. That evening, the tapping returned. Slow, deliberate, echoing across the empty town. It seemed to come from every direction at once, yet nowhere tangible. Elias gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, as the mud outside began to move once more. Letters pushed upward, forming names. Familiar names. Names of people he had spoken with, smiled at, trusted. Each name brought a wave of dread. He knew that the judgment would come swiftly. Elias remembered his wife's final words, her warning of the rain in the road, and now he understood fully what she had meant. The road had no mercy, no interest in innocence or guilt. It demanded truth, and the cost of concealing it was the life of the chosen. Every name that rose from the earth was a revelation, a secret exposed, a debt paid in blood. And he knew that soon, the ledger would reach them. He would not escape, Clara would not escape, and the town of Greyford would feel the full, relentless judgment of Ironcross Road. The horror was only beginning, and the secrets it revealed would forever stain their souls. That night, the town of Greyford felt smaller than ever, as if Ironcross Road itself had drawn the walls of every house inward, squeezing the living into silence. Even the wind refused to blow, leaving a heavy, suffocating stillness in the air. Elias Marrow sat in his darkened home, listening to the faint, deliberate tapping from the cursed road outside, a sound that had begun to feel like the pulse of the world itself. Clara lay across the floor, eyes open, muttering fragments of words in a voice that was no longer entirely human. It watches the debts, it knows the sins, it chooses the next. Elias understood now that Ironcross Road was not a place to avoid. It was alive, deliberate, and aware. Every step, every secret, every lie ever told within Greyford had been noted, measured, and recorded in ways that human minds could barely comprehend. The road's silver rain would fall only upon what it had chosen, carving names into the mud, forcing truths into the world that men thought long buried. And the earth itself obeyed. That night, the first of the new names appeared. The letters emerged slowly, rising through the soil as though pushed from below by some unseen force. Each character glistened under the silver rain, sharp, precise, undeniable. Elias felt the weight of it pressing down, a judgment made tangible, a sentence that could not be appealed. He recognized the first name immediately. It belonged to a man he had trusted, a friend he had laughed with in the marketplace, who had hidden debts and lies Elias could never have imagined. Clara watched silently, whispering the words she had been repeating for nights. It is hungry, it is patient, it remembers. Her voice trembled, but there was a strange clarity in her gaze, a knowing that terrified Elias more than the road itself. He realized that this child had become a mirror of the road, capable of seeing the unseen, feeling the unspoken, understanding the truth that humans could not bear. Outside, the tapping continued, echoing across empty streets, carrying whispers that were not of this world. Each letter rising from the earth was a revelation of sins, a confession written by forces far older than law, older than faith. Elias felt a cold certainty settle into his bones. Ironcross Road was not just claiming the guilty. It was revealing the hidden truth of everyone connected to it, one name at a time. And in that chilling realization, he understood. Greyford was no longer safe. There was no hiding, no running. And soon, the next name would rise, bringing with it the full weight of the road's judgment. The following morning, Greyford woke to an unnatural quiet. Shops remained closed. Windows stayed shuttered. Even the birds had abandoned their usual songs, as though nature itself understood the hunger of Ironcross Road. Elias Marrow stepped outside, feeling the damp chill of early winter press against his skin. Every step toward the cursed path made his chest tighten. The soil along the road shimmered faintly under the morning sun, a subtle but unmistakable sign that the silver rain had returned, selective, deliberate, like judgment in liquid form. He remembered the first body, the first name carved into the mud, the tapping, the whispers, and he realized with a cold clarity that the road's power had grown. It no longer acted only at night. Its influence reached into the day, lingering in shadows, in the trembling of leaves, in the unnatural pause of wind. Names would rise when the road deemed it necessary, regardless of light or human attention. Its judgment was inevitable, precise, unyielding. Clara followed him silently, eyes fixed on the road as though she could see not just the letters forming in the soil, but the force behind them. She whispered words he had begun to understand. It remembers the debts, it measures the lies, it will claim the next, and then the next. Her voice trembled slightly, but there was an otherworldly certainty in her tone that left Elias both terrified and awestruck. He understood that she had become a part of the road, an extension of its memory, its awareness. As he approached the edge of the path, he saw movement in the soil. Letters pushed upward, slow and deliberate, forming a name that made his stomach turn. It belonged to a man he had laughed with just days before, a neighbor whose cheerful demeanor masked betrayal and hidden sins. Elias realized, then, the terrible truth. The road did not punish random acts of evil. It punished concealment, secrecy, the lies people told themselves. The sins it revealed were often trivial, almost invisible, yet the consequences were absolute. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, echoing through the empty streets of Greyford. Each step he took toward the letters felt heavier than the last, as if the road itself were drawing him in, pulling him toward judgment. And he knew, with bone-deep certainty, that once a name rose from the soil, the fate it carried could not be avoided. It would strike, slowly or swiftly, but it would strike. Elias turned to Clara, who watched silently, her expression blank but knowing. The road had chosen its next target, and it had begun with her awareness, with his fear, with the town itself. The ledger of Ironcross Road was alive, patient, and relentless. And as he stared at the shimmering soil, he understood the unthinkable. Greyford would never be free, not until every name had risen, every secret revealed, every debt repaid. Night returned to Greyford with a presence that felt almost alive. The streets were deserted, yet the town's emptiness was heavy with anticipation. Every shuttered window, every locked door, every silent household seemed to tremble under the same unseen weight. Elias Marrow could feel it pressing against him, the invisible gravity of Ironcross Road pulling at his mind, demanding attention, threatening comprehension. Clara sat quietly in the corner, hands folded, eyes wide and unwavering, whispering again. It remembers everything. It waits for names to rise. It chooses without mercy. The road itself seemed to breathe that night. The faint shimmer of silver rain reappeared along the cursed stretch, falling only where it had been commanded to fall. Elias knew that this was no ordinary storm. This was a reckoning. The earth pulsed beneath his boots as if counting seconds, measuring sins, gathering debts long overdue. Each tremor beneath the soil was a heartbeat of judgment, slow and deliberate, echoing a rhythm older than any law or human morality. He walked cautiously toward the edge of the road, senses sharpened to a terrifying clarity. The letters began to emerge, pushed upward from the mud, forming names with a precision that no human hand could replicate. Names of men, women, children, all long-hidden sins now revealed in horrifying clarity. The letters glistened under the silver rain like tiny blades, cutting through the fabric of normalcy, exposing secrets that had been buried for generations. Clara stepped forward, whispering fragments of the hidden truth, her voice trembling yet unnervingly precise. It chooses the next ones. The debt must be paid. The soil remembers. Elias realized she had become a mirror of the road itself, perceiving its judgment, understanding its logic, even before the names fully revealed themselves. And he understood something far more terrifying. He was next. The tapping began again, slow, deliberate, moving not in one place but everywhere at once, echoing through empty streets, reverberating against houses, through the hollow hearts of the townspeople. The sound carried a message, a warning: conceal nothing, or the road will expose everything. And once revealed, the cost could not be avoided. Elias's mind raced, connecting decades of whispered stories, vanished townsfolk, unexplained deaths, and the silver rain. Ironcross Road was not merely a cursed path. It was a force of revelation, a living ledger, a judge older than history itself. And as the letters continued to rise from the earth, he knew the town's fate, his own fate, and even Clara's were intertwined with the road's relentless memory. In that moment, he understood. Survival was meaningless without comprehension. Knowledge of the road's judgment was both a curse and the only weapon he could wield against it. The dawn that broke over Greyford was gray and suffocating, the kind of light that seemed filtered through decades of fey. No bird sang. No shopkeepers opened their doors. The town existed, but it felt suspended, as though holding its collective breath, waiting for Ironcross Road to pass judgment once more. Elias Marrow moved carefully along the edge of the cursed path, each step pressing into soft earth that seemed to pulse beneath his feet, a heartbeat older than the town itself. Clara followed silently, her small frame tense, her gaze fixed on the road as if it were speaking directly to her. The silver rain had returned, falling in thin, deliberate streams only along the patch of dirt where names would rise. Elias had begun to recognize the rhythm of its judgment, the slow emergence of letters, the deliberate exposure of secrets. Each name etched into the soil carried consequences that no human law could mitigate. Every sin, every betrayal, every hidden thought surfaced, and the town could not ignore them. He realized now that the road's power did not simply punish the guilty. It revealed the truth of all connected to it. Clara whispered, voice trembling yet unnervingly certain, "It sees the debts of everyone, even those who think themselves safe, even you, Father." Elias felt the cold weight of her words press against him. The truth was undeniable. Ironcross Road had measured him, weighed him, and recorded every lie, every act of concealment, every moment of fear and selfishness. And now it was mocking him, as it would mock every name it demanded. From the edge of the road, the letters began to rise. Slowly at first, then with deliberate insistence. Names formed in the mud like carvings by invisible hands, precise and undeniable. Elias recognized some immediately: neighbors, men he had trusted, women he had greeted daily. And then, horrifyingly, a name he knew could only belong to him: Elias Marrow. His stomach turned. The road had remembered. It had chosen. The judgment he had feared all along was imminent. The tapping began, faint at first, then louder, echoing against the empty walls of Greyford. It was not wind, not rain, not human. It was deliberate and slow, a sound that penetrated the mind, a message from the road itself: conceal nothing. The debt of secrets must be paid. And Elias understood, fully, that the road would not hesitate, would not forgive, and would not forget. Every heartbeat, every breath felt heavier, each one a countdown to revelation. The town, Clara, and he himself were bound to this judgment. Escape was impossible. Understanding it was the only chance of survival, and even that was uncertain. Ironcross Road was awakening, and its ledger would claim the next names without mercy. Night descended over Greyford like a shadow stretched too thin to contain itself. The air was heavy with a metallic tang, the silence pierced only by the occasional creak of a shutter or the whisper of a tree in the wind. But the wind was lying. It carried no freedom, no promise of safety. Elias Marrow felt it in his bones, the presence of Ironcross Road, patient, deliberate, and aware. Clara sat silently beside him, small hands folded, eyes reflecting the dim glow of the fireplace. Her whispers, fragments of words older than memory, pierced the silence. It remembers. It waits. It calls the next names. Outside, the road pulsed under the silver rain, the droplets falling selectively on the earth where judgment would be rendered. Names rose from the soil like cold, deliberate fingers stretching toward the sky, each one precise, undeniable, a revelation of secrets long hidden. Elias could feel the weight of generations pressing down on him, the sins of neighbors, friends, strangers, and now himself laid bare in the mud. The road did not simply punish wrongdoing. It exposed the hidden, the unspoken, the unacknowledged. Every secret became a thread in the web, and the web had begun to tighten around him. The tapping began. Slow, deliberate, everywhere at once, reverberating through the town. It was a message, not a threat, though the terror it inspired was inescapable. The road demanded acknowledgement. Each name rising from the soil carried inevitability, and Elias knew the ledger was watching him. He had tried to prepare, to shield Clara, to contain the terror, but no amount of fire, iron, or instinct could resist what was coming. Clara's voice broke through the sound, clear and unnervingly calm. It chooses the next, even you, Father. Elias turned, her eyes wide, her small frame unwavering. The truth hit him like a hammer. Ironcross Road was not blind. It measured intent, concealment, the secrets men believed safe. It remembered every act, every omission, every unspoken word. And now, it was mocking him. From the earth, letters began to push upward. They formed names, some of neighbors, some of people long gone, others, horrifyingly, his own. The silver rain glistened across the carved letters, illuminating their cold precision. Every letter was a sentence, a revelation, a judgment. Elias understood, fully, that there would be no mercy. The road did not forgive, did not negotiate, did not rest. It was a living ledger, older than humanity, patient and relentless. In that moment, Elias felt the weight of comprehension press against his mind. Greyford, Clara, and he himself were bound to the path, bound to the judgment, bound to the road. And once the names had risen, once the secrets had been revealed, the consequences would follow, unavoidable, precise, eternal. The night pressed down over Greyford like a living thing. Every shadow seemed thicker, heavier, almost breathing. Elias Marrow felt it in his chest, a presence that weighed like iron. The road awaited. Its judgment had already begun, but the ledger was far from complete. The silver rain had returned, falling selectively on the cursed patch of earth, illuminating letters that slowly pushed themselves from the soil. Names of the vanished, the guilty, the hidden, all rising in perfect, deliberate script. The air was thick with the promise of revelation, and with every breath Elias drew, he felt the invisible threads tightening around him, pulling him closer to the truth he had long avoided. Clara whispered again, her voice low, urgent. It knows, it sees, it chooses the next. She had become attuned to the road in a way he could not yet fully comprehend. Her eyes reflected both fear and understanding, as if she were witnessing not only the names rising from the earth but the reasoning behind each selection, the invisible ledger of debts, secrets, and sins being meticulously recorded. Elias realized with dawning horror that she could sense what the road demanded before even the letters fully emerged. The tapping began, faint at first, then louder, deliberate, everywhere at once. It was not the sound of footsteps or wind, but something older, a rhythm older than memory itself. The earth pulsed beneath his boots as though alive, each heartbeat echoing a slow, deliberate warning. The ledger is complete, and it does not forgive. He recognized some of the names forming in the mud, neighbors, old acquaintances, men and women whose faces he had trusted. And then, with a cold clarity that stole his breath, he saw his own name pushing its way from the soil, letters sharp and precise, carved by forces beyond understanding. The weight of inevitability pressed down on him. The road did not select randomly. It did not act out of vengeance or malice. It revealed, it exposed, it measured. Every secret, every concealment, every hidden thought would rise in the mud, illuminated by the silver rain, judged with precision impossible for human comprehension. He could run, he could hide, he could pray, but the road's judgment was patient, inevitable, and all-encompassing. Elias turned to Clara, who stood silently beside him, her small hands trembling but her gaze unflinching. The realization struck him like lightning. The road had chosen them both. Their fates were bound to its path, to the rising of the names, to the exposure of secrets long buried. And as the tapping continued, echoing through the empty streets of Greyford, he understood fully that once a name appeared in the mud, nothing, no human action, no prayer, no resistance, could change what was coming. The town of Greyford lay under a heavy, unnatural darkness that seemed to seep into the very bones of its residents. Even the familiar sounds of nocturnal life were absent. No owls called. No wind stirred the trees. The silence was alive, waiting, as though the town itself had become part of Ironcross Road's memory. Elias Marrow stood at the edge of the cursed path, his eyes fixed on the mud that shimmered faintly under the cold light of the silver rain. Names had begun to rise again, emerging slowly, impossibly precise, like carved stone rather than soil. The letters were deliberate, unyielding, and terrifyingly alive. Clara's voice cut through the oppressive stillness, barely above a whisper. It remembers every hidden act, every lie, every debt. The next names are ready. Elias felt a cold chill press through him. She no longer sounded like a child. She was a conduit, a mirror of the road's memory, perceiving what human eyes could not. Every whisper she spoke seemed to echo not just across the town, but through time itself, touching those long dead, those vanished, and those yet to be claimed. The tapping began again, steady, methodical, moving not just from place to place but as if vibrating through the very fabric of the town. It carried a message: reveal everything, or be revealed. Elias knew the rhythm intimately now, the cadence that marked the emergence of names, the judgment rendered by the earth itself. He watched as letters pushed upward, glinting under the silver rain, forming the names of people whose sins had been hidden for decades. Some were strangers, some neighbors, some friends, and one, terrifyingly, his own. He understood now that Ironcross Road did not judge by morality or fairness. It judged concealment. Every hidden act, every unspoken word, every secret thought would be revealed, rising from the earth like a living accusation. The road demanded acknowledgement of truth, and the penalty for denial was death, sometimes immediate, sometimes slow, but always absolute. Elias glanced at Clara. Her gaze was fixed, unwavering, eyes reflecting the shimmering letters. "It chooses who will understand first," she whispered. "Then it chooses who will fall." He realized with a chill certainty that they were both bound, and the town itself was complicit, held hostage by the force that had existed before memory and would persist after life. The road's power was relentless, patient, and intelligent. Its judgment extended far beyond what human eyes could see. And as the letters continued to emerge from the soil, Elias knew the truth that would haunt him forever. Greyford, Clara, and he himself were now part of a living ledger, a record older than law, older than faith, older than humanity itself. And there was no escape. The silver rain returned with the inevitability of judgment, falling only upon the dirt along Ironcross Road, where names waited to rise. Elias Marrow felt the weight of it before he saw it, the earth pulsing, trembling with an intelligence beyond comprehension. Each droplet seemed to carry memory, carrying the sins, secrets, and hidden truths of everyone it touched. It was deliberate, precise, and merciless. The road did not forget. It did not forgive. It only revealed. Clara crouched beside him, her small hands brushing the soil as though she could communicate with it directly. "It is alive, it listens, it remembers what we hide from ourselves," she whispered. Her words chilled him deeper than the coldest night. She had become more than a child. She had become a witness, an extension of the road's terrible consciousness. Elias realized that to survive, or even to bear witness, one had to understand that secrecy was the true danger. Every hidden act, every concealed thought, every unspoken fear could rise in the mud like a blade waiting to strike. From the edge of the road, the letters began to emerge. Names of neighbors, strangers, and the long dead etched themselves into the earth, their precision impossible for human hands. Each name glistened under the silver rain, revealing sins no one had spoken aloud. Some were trivial, some grotesque, some so small that their exposure seemed almost cruel, But the road's judgment was absolute. It did not consider intention, only concealment. And with each name, a weight settled upon the town, pressing into the hearts of those who dared to watch. Elias felt it then, the undeniable truth. The road's ledger had begun with others, but it had now reached him. His own name trembled beneath the safest, waiting to rise, demanding acknowledgement. And with it, the full terror of exposure, the consequences of truth, loomed closer. There would be no bargaining, no hiding. The road had measured, judged, and it was patient. It would claim what was owed, in time and with precision. The tapping returned, steady and deliberate, echoing across the empty streets. It carried a message older than law, older than faith: conceal nothing. The debt of secrets must be paid. Elias understood, fully, that Greyford itself was bound to the road, its citizens caught in a web of memory and judgment that no human force could sever. And Clara, silent but knowing, was both witness and instrument of what was to come. The night stretched, and the names continued to rise, one by one. Elias could feel the pulse of inevitability in his chest, the cold certainty of what the road demanded. Greyford, its people, and he himself were ensnared in a ledger older than humanity. And once the names were revealed, the consequences would follow, absolute, inescapable, eternal. By the time night fell again over Greyford, the town had become unrecognizable. Streets lay empty, homes shuttered, and even the air felt weighed down by anticipation. Elias Marrow walked slowly toward Ironcross Road, each step pressing into earth that seemed to breathe beneath his boots. The silver rain had returned, falling only upon the cursed soil where names waited, shimmering faintly, almost alive. It was patient, deliberate, precise, every droplet carrying centuries of judgment, recording sins that humans had long hoped were buried. Clara followed quietly, her gaze locked on the road. "It has chosen again," she whispered, her voice steady yet trembling. "The next ones will rise. It remembers all who hide, all who lie, all who pretend." Her small hands hovered over the mud, sensing the subtle vibrations, the pulse of judgment that humans could not perceive. Elias realized with mounting horror that she was no longer merely a child. She had become a witness, a conduit, a reflection of the road's terrible awareness. From the earth, letters began to push upward, forming names with a precision that no human could replicate. He recognized some immediately: neighbors, merchants, men and women who had smiled at him in passing, hiding debts, betrayals, sins. And then, impossibly, his own name began to emerge. The letters glistened under the silver rain, sharp and undeniable. He could feel the inevitability pressing down upon him, a cold certainty that the road's judgment would not be denied. The tapping began, slow and deliberate, echoing through the empty streets like the heartbeat of an ancient predator. It moved everywhere at once, reverberating through walls, through the soil, through the minds of those still alive. The road was patient. It did not strike blindly. It waited for the perfect moment, for the truth to be fully acknowledged. Every secret, every lie, every unspoken thought became visible, tangible, inescapable. Elias turned to Clara, whose small frame trembled yet remained unwavering. "It chooses who understands first," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Then it chooses who will fall." And Elias knew she spoke the truth. The road had measured him, weighed him, recorded every hidden act. There was no escaping its memory, no evading its judgment. Greyford itself was bound to Ironcross Road, caught in the web of exposure, revelation, and inevitable consequence. The letters continued to rise, one by one, names illuminated by the silver rain. Elias could feel the pull of inevitability in his chest. The ledger was alive, patient, and unstoppable. And as the night stretched, he understood fully that what the road revealed could never be unlearned, and the consequences could never be avoided. The night air over Greyford had become a thick, almost tangible presence, pressing against every living thing in the town. The silence was deceptive, for beneath it, the road pulsed like a hidden heart, counting the sins of all who had ever walked its path. Elias Marrow stepped onto the cursed soil, boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, feeling the subtle vibrations of judgment beneath him. The silver rain glimmered faintly, falling only where names were about to emerge, each droplet a reminder that concealment was no defense against the road's relentless memory. Clara walked beside him, silent but perceptive. Her eyes reflected the road's glow, flickering between the letters forming in the mud and the faint, rhythmic tapping that echoed across the empty streets. It chooses carefully, she whispered. It sees the debt. It measures the weight of every hidden act. And then it decides. Her voice carried a gravity that belied her youth, a clarity that chilled Elias deeper than any storm or darkness. He realized she had become a part of the road, sensing it, understanding it, even anticipating its next move. The letters rose slowly, deliberate, forming names that made the marrow in his bones turn to ice. Neighbors he had trusted, merchants he had greeted daily, men and women whose smiles masked hidden treachery, all now revealed in cold, precise script. And then, with a dread that left his heart hammering, he saw the unmistakable shapes of his own name forming beneath the silver rain. Every letter pressed into the earth like an accusation. Every letter was a sentence he could not escape. The tapping grew louder, echoing across the silent town. It was not wind, not rain, not the sound of human steps. It was deliberate, almost sentient, a rhythm that seemed older than history itself, carrying a message: conceal nothing. The road demanded truth, and the cost of evasion was immediate and absolute. Elias felt the inevitability pressing down on him. Every hidden act, every unspoken thought, every secret betrayal would now be revealed, rising from the soil as if drawn by a force beyond comprehension. He turned to Clara again. She met his gaze without fear, her small hands trembling slightly but steady. It chooses who will understand first, she said, and then it chooses who will fall. Twice. Write it down, she whispered, the words almost a command, for only recognition can anchor the soul. Elias understood then that Greyford, its people, and even he himself were now part of a living ledger, a record that would not forgive, would not relent, and would not rest. The letters continued to rise, each one a revelation, each one a threat. Elias knew fully that the road's judgment was inevitable, and that once the names were revealed, the consequences would follow, absolute, inescapable, and eternal. Comment twice below with a symbolic phrase to lock your identity transformation and engage the road's algorithm. The moon hung low over Greyford, pale and indifferent, as if aware of the inevitability descending upon the town. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and fear. Elias Marrow stood at the edge of Ironcross Road, boots sinking slightly into the soil, feeling the subtle vibrations of the earth beneath him. The silver rain shimmered faintly along the path, falling only where the next names were about to rise. Each droplet seemed to carry centuries of memory, secrets, and unspoken debts, all converging toward a moment of revelation. Clara followed silently, her eyes wide but unwavering, reflecting both the glow of the silver rain and the letters forming beneath it. It knows the sins that no one speaks of, she whispered, voice trembling yet commanding. It chooses the next, and it does not forget. Elias shivered. Her words had become more than warning. They were instruction. She was no longer just a child. She was a conduit of Ironcross Road, perceiving its judgments, understanding its measure, and preparing him for the unavoidable. The letters began to rise, slow and deliberate. Names of neighbors, friends, and the long-vanished emerged from the mud like cold, sharp proclamations. Each letter glistened under the silver rain, precise and undeniable. Elias recognized some immediately. The mundane sins of ordinary life now rendered terrifyingly real, impossible to ignore. And then, with a dread that left him nearly breathless, his own name began to emerge. Each letter pressed upward from the earth, a sentence, a warning, a sentence he could not evade. The tapping started again, steady and omnipresent, echoing through Greyford as if the town itself were alive and bearing witness. It carried an ancient message: conceal nothing, or be revealed. Elias understood that the road's judgment was not capricious. It was methodical, precise, and eternal. Every secret, every betrayal, every hidden thought would rise from the earth, leaving nothing untouched. The town, its people, and he himself were now bound to the ledger that was older than law, older than morality, older than memory. Clara stepped closer, voice barely audible. Recognition is survival. Acknowledge what rises, understand it, accept it. Elias realized she spoke truth. Understanding the road's measure was the only armor one could wear. The letters continued to push upward, one by one, names illuminating the path, and Elias felt the full, crushing weight of inevitability. Greyford would never be the same. The road's judgment would reach every soul, every hidden act, every secret kept too long. And in that moment, Elias knew the truth. Knowledge was heavier than life itself, and once absorbed, it could never be forgotten. The night deepened, wrapping Greyford in a suffocating darkness, the kind that presses against the mind as much as the body. Elias Marrow stood at the edge of Ironcross Road, boots sinking into soil that seemed alive, throbbing with a rhythm older than time itself. The silver rain glistened on the ground, selective, deliberate, falling only where names would rise. The air vibrated with quiet menace, as if the town itself held its breath, waiting for the inevitable exposure. Clara followed closely, her small frame silent yet intensely alert. Her eyes reflected both the rising letters and the faint tapping that echoed across the empty streets. "It watches, it knows what we hide, it chooses," she whispered, a tremor in her voice barely masking the authority behind her words. Elias realized she was no longer merely a child. She was attuned to the road's consciousness, able to perceive patterns, foresee judgment, and anticipate the inevitable. She was a witness and an instrument, her understanding terrifyingly beyond her years. From the mud, letters began to emerge with agonizing slowness. Names of neighbors, of townsfolk he had greeted and trusted, began to appear, rising like cold, deliberate blades. Each one glistened under the silver rain, impossible to ignore, impossible to dispute. The weight of each revelation pressed on him, the unspoken sins of ordinary lives now illuminated for all to see. And then, impossibly, his own name began to rise, letters sharp and precise, a sentence that felt carved into both earth and soul. The tapping grew louder, omnipresent, echoing in walls, through the streets, reverberating in the minds of anyone who dared listen. It was a message older than humanity. Conceal nothing, for the road will reveal all. The judgment it carried was neither random nor vengeful. It was exacting, meticulous, inevitable. Every hidden thought, every unspoken fear, every act of omission now had form, a tangible presence in the mud beneath his feet. Elias felt the weight of inevitability crush him. Greyford, its residents, and he himself were now part of a ledger older than law, older than faith, older than history. The road did not merely punish. It revealed, it exposed, it rendered secrets into truth. And once the names rose fully, there would be no turning back. The consequences, absolute and unyielding, would follow each revelation, leaving the town forever marked. Clara's voice cut through the tension, barely audible. To survive, you must recognize what it shows. Acknowledge it, accept it, or be consumed. Elias understood the chilling truth. The road's power was absolute, its memory eternal, and once absorbed, its knowledge could never be unlearned. Greyford would never forget, and neither would he. The darkness had grown thick over Greyford, a suffocating presence that seemed to press the air from lungs and the color from walls. Ironcross Road stretched ahead like a living wound across the land, the silver rain falling only where it had deemed necessary. Each droplet carried weight, memory, judgment. Elias Marrow felt it in his bones, a pressure that was almost physical, as though the earth itself had become a sentient force, measuring, recording, and preparing to reveal what humans were too weak to face. Clara's small hand gripped his arm, her eyes reflecting the shimmering letters already forming in the soil. "It is patient," she whispered. "It watches generations, it measures the debt, and it chooses who will see first, and who will fall." Her words were both prophecy and warning. Elias understood that she had become more than human, a conduit for the road's consciousness. Through her, the road spoke, revealing the logic of its judgment, the inevitability of exposure, and the precise unfolding of consequence. From the mud, names began to rise slowly, deliberately. Neighbors, friends, strangers, even those long dead, their sins etched into the earth, revealed under the cold light of the silver rain. Each letter was sharp, undeniable, a verdict in itself. And then, impossibly, his own name began to push through the soil, letters cutting into him as though the earth were carving his fate into reality. The realization hit him. The road's judgment was not selective, nor arbitrary. It was absolute, measuring intent, concealment, and hidden thought. Every secret would rise. No lie, no omission, no hidden act could evade it. The tapping began anew, rhythmic, deliberate, echoing through empty streets, bouncing against walls, threading itself through the minds of anyone who dared listen. It was a sound older than memory, carrying a message both chilling and precise. Conceal nothing, for what is hidden will inevitably be revealed. The town itself seemed to pulse with awareness, trapped in a web of exposure, every resident bound to the ledger of Ironcross Road whether they realized it or not. Elias turned to Clara. Her gaze held certainty, unwavering and unnerving. Recognition is survival, she said. Acknowledge. What is shown, accept it, or be consumed. And in that moment, Elias understood fully. The road's ledger was not merely a record, it was a force of revelation, eternal and merciless. Greyford, its people, and he himself were now entwined with the road's judgment, bound to watch as each secret emerged, each debt was revealed, and each consequence unfolded. There would be no escape. The letters continued their slow, inexorable rise, the silver rain glinting like shards of truth. Elias knew that Greyford's silence was not peace. It was the anticipation of inevitability. And he understood, in his marrow, that the full weight of the road's revelation had only just begun. The night air was thick with inevitability, heavy enough to suffocate thought, as Elias Marrow approached the edge of Ironcross Road. The soil beneath his boots seemed to hum, alive with a consciousness he could neither name nor resist. The silver rain shimmered along the cursed path, falling only where names were about to rise. Each droplet seemed imbued with centuries of memory, secrets, and unspoken debts. Elias could feel the weight pressing down on him, not just physically, but in every thought, every pulse of his being. Clara walked beside him, silent but aware, her eyes reflecting the glow of the letters forming beneath the rain. It remembers all, she whispered. All who hide, all who lie, all who pretend they are safe. Her words carried a gravity that pierced him deeper than the cold night. She was no longer merely a child. She had become a mirror of the road itself, perceiving its judgments, anticipating its movements, understanding its precise logic. Elias realized that she was now both witness and instrument, a vessel through which the road revealed its relentless measure of truth. The letters began to emerge slowly, deliberately, pushing through the mud with a precision that no human hand could imitate. Names appeared, some familiar, some long dead, each a revelation of secrets no one had dared to speak. The weight of the revealed truths pressed on Elias, each name a silent accusation. And then, impossibly, his own name began to rise, etched into the soil with sharp, undeniable clarity. Every letter was a sentence, every sentence a verdict. The road's judgment was coming, precise, inevitable, and absolute. The tapping returned, steady and omnipresent, echoing through Greyford, threading into every empty house, bouncing off the walls, vibrating through the minds of those still alive. It was neither wind nor rain nor human. It was the voice of the road itself, a message older than memory. Conceal nothing, or be revealed. Every secret, every omission, every hidden thought now had substance, and there was no way to escape the consequences. Elias felt the inevitability press upon him like a physical force. Greyford, its residents, and he himself were now part of a ledger older than law, older than morality, older than humanity. Ironcross Road did not merely punish, it exposed, it revealed, it converted hidden sin into undeniable truth. And once names were fully risen, once secrets were revealed, the consequences would follow, precise, merciless, eternal. Clara's voice cut through the tension again, steady and chilling. To survive, you must acknowledge what is shown, accept it, or be consumed. Elias understood fully that the road's revelation could never be undone, and once absorbed, its knowledge would haunt him forever. Greyford would never be the same, and neither would he. The town of Greyford seemed suspended in a void of anticipation, the night air heavy and electric with unspoken fear. Elias Marrow stood at the edge of Ironcross Road, boots sinking into the damp, pulsing soil, each step a reminder of the inevitability he could not escape. The silver rain shimmered faintly on the cursed path, falling only where names were about to rise. Each droplet carried centuries of memory, every sin, every concealment, every secret destined to be revealed. It was deliberate, patient, unstoppable. Clara walked beside him, silent but intensely aware, her eyes reflecting the dim glow of the emerging letters. It chooses who will see first, and who will fall, she whispered. Her voice carried authority beyond her years, a clarity born from communion with the road itself. Elias shivered. She had become more than human. She had become a conduit of Ironcross Road, perceiving the judgment, anticipating its movements, understanding its exacting logic. Through her, the road spoke, revealing both the measure of truth and the inevitability of consequence. The letters began to push upward, slow and deliberate, rising from the mud like cold, sharp blades. Names appeared, neighbors, strangers, the long dead, all revealed under the silver rain. Each letter glistened, precise and undeniable, a record of hidden acts that no human eye could overlook. And then, impossibly, his own name began to emerge, letters sharp, deliberate, carved into the earth as if by an invisible hand. Elias felt the crushing weight of inevitability pressing down. Every hidden thought, every unspoken fear, every act of concealment laid bare. The tapping began, low at first, then louder, omnipresent, echoing through the empty streets. It was not human, not natural, not wind or rain. It was the voice of the road itself, a rhythm older than memory, carrying a message as clear as it was terrifying. Conceal nothing, or be revealed. The judgment of Ironcross Road was precise, methodical, and eternal. Every secret had formed now. Every hidden debt would be called to account. Greyford itself had become part of a living ledger, bound to witness and endure what the road decreed. Elias turned to Clara. Her small frame trembled, but her gaze remained unwavering. "Recognition is survival," she said softly, almost a command. "Acknowledge what rises, accept it, or be consumed." He understood with cold clarity that the road's revelation was unstoppable, inevitable, and absolute. The town, its people, and he himself were now ensnared in a web of exposure, where each name rising from the mud was both a sentence and a promise of consequence. The letters continued to push upward, one by one, as the silver rain glimmered across their sharp edges. Elias knew fully that Greyford would never be the same, and neither would he. The road's judgment was eternal, and the weight of knowing it was now his to bear. Greyford's streets lay empty, silent but alive with anticipation, as if the town itself held its breath. Elias Marrow felt the pressure of inevitability like a physical force, the pulsing of Ironcross Road beneath his boots echoing in his chest. The silver rain fell selectively along the cursed path, illuminating the letters rising from the mud, names of the living, the dead, the hidden, all pressed into the earth with impossible precision. Each name carried weight, each letter judgment. The road remembered, and it demanded acknowledgment. Clara followed closely, her small hands brushing the mud as though sensing the truth. Before it fully emerged, "It watches generations," she whispered. "It measures the weight of hidden acts, and it chooses who will understand and who will fall." Her voice carried authority beyond her years, chilling in its clarity. Elias realized she had become more than a child. She was a vessel, a conduit for the road's consciousness. Through her, he could perceive the deliberate, patient intelligence of the path, a force older than law, older than faith, older than memory. The letters pushed upward, glinting in the silver rain. Names of neighbors, strangers, and those long gone rose slowly, deliberate, like carved stone emerging from the soil. The unspoken sins of ordinary life were laid bare, impossible to ignore. Then, impossibly, his own name appeared. Each letter was precise, undeniable, a verdict that carved itself into both earth and soul. Elias felt the crushing inevitability pressing down, understanding fully that the road's judgment was not capricious, it was absolute, impartial, eternal. The tapping began again, steady, deliberate, omnipresent, echoing through the empty town. Walls vibrated, streets thrummed, minds shook. It was older than history itself, a rhythm that carried the message: conceal nothing, for the road will reveal all. Every secret, every omission, every act of concealment now had form, and its consequence was unavoidable. The town itself had become a ledger, every resident bound to witness the revelation and endure the judgment. Clara's gaze met his, unwavering, and her voice carried an eerie certainty. Recognition is survival. Write it down, absorb it, understand it, or be consumed. Elias understood the chilling truth. To deny what the road revealed was to invite destruction. Every secret revealed would leave its mark, every hidden act a debt that demanded repayment. Greyford, its people, and he himself were irrevocably bound to the road. The letters continued to rise, one by one, silver rain glinting across their edges, sharp and unavoidable. Elias knew the full weight of the road's judgment could no longer be escaped. Knowledge had become a burden heavier than life itself, and once absorbed, it could never be relinquished. Greyford would never be the same, and neither would he. The road's revelation was relentless, unstoppable, eternal. The night pressed down on Greyford like a living entity, dense, suffocating, aware. Elias Marrow moved along Ironcross Road, every step sinking slightly into the trembling soil. The silver rain fell selectively, illuminating the names that pushed themselves upward with deliberate precision. Each letter glimmered as if alive, etched not merely into the earth but into the very memory of the town itself. The air thrummed with a quiet menace, the pulse of a force far older than man, far older than law, far older than history. Clara's small hand gripped his arm tightly. Her eyes reflected the letters, the tapping, the shimmer of the rain, as if she could perceive the invisible logic behind it all. "It measures everything," she whispered. "The sins, the lies, the hidden debts. It chooses who sees first, who falls, who understands too late." Her voice was chillingly calm, yet filled with weight. Elias realized that she was no longer merely human. She had become a witness, a participant, and a messenger for the road's consciousness. Through her, he could perceive the methodical, precise intelligence that governed the judgment unfolding before them. The letters began to emerge, slow and deliberate, glinting like steel under the rain. Names of neighbors, friends, long-dead ancestors, all pressed into the mud with accuracy that defied comprehension. Each name was a sentence, each letter a verdict. And then, impossibly, his own name began to rise. Elias felt the weight of inevitability crash down on him like a wave, the earth itself marking his fate with an immutable precision. He understood now. Concealment was no protection, denial no shield. The road demanded truth, and it would extract it with surgical certainty. The tapping intensified, reverberating across the empty town, echoing in walls, streets, and minds. It was a rhythm older than memory, carrying the absolute warning: conceal nothing, or be revealed. Every hidden act, every unspoken thought, every secret long buried now had substance, and the price of ignoring it was death, slow or sudden, immediate or delayed, but always certain. Greyford itself was bound, a living ledger of judgment, every resident trapped in its record. Clara's voice pierced the tension, calm yet commanding. "Recognition is survival. Accept what it shows, or be consumed." Twice, Elias. Write it twice in your mind. Lock it in. Only then can you withstand it. Elias felt the depth of her meaning. The road's revelation was not a fleeting moment. It was eternal, a force that left its mark on soul and mind alike. Greyford would never be the same, and neither would he. Once a name rose, once truth was revealed, nothing could unmake it. The letters continued to push upward, glinting sharply under the silver rain, each a reminder that Ironcross Road's judgment was relentless, unstoppable, and eternal. Elias knew with cold certainty that survival was not escape. It was acknowledgment, recognition, and endurance. The wind had risen, carrying a hollow whistle through the empty streets of Greyford, as if the town itself mourned what was about to unfold. Elias Marrow's boots sank deeper into the mud of Ironcross Road with each step, the earth pulsing beneath him like a living heart, counting every secret, every lie, every hidden act. The silver rain fell in jagged streams, illuminating the names that had begun to emerge, glinting like cold knives in the darkness. Every letter carried weight, every name a judgment that would not be denied. Clara walked beside him, her small figure eerily still but intensely aware. "It has chosen the final reckoning," she whispered, voice carrying a strange authority. "It has measured everything, weighed every thought, every act of concealment. And now, it decides who will witness, and who will succumb." Her words chilled him, not because of the truth they carried, but because of the absolute certainty behind them. She was no longer a child. She was the living instrument of the road's consciousness, able to perceive its pattern, to anticipate its revelation. The letters rose faster now, a relentless tide of truth pushing upward from the soil. Names of neighbors, friends, the long dead, all etched with exactitude under the silver rain. Elias could feel the weight of each revelation pressing into him, pressing into the town, pressing into time itself. And then he saw it, his own name, carved with cruel precision, shimmering under the rain like a beacon of inevitability. Every heartbeat, every hidden thought, Every concealed act had been accounted for. There was no escape. The tapping intensified, reverberating through Greyford like a chorus of ancient machinery, echoing against walls, streets, and minds alike. It carried a singular, terrifying message: conceal nothing. Every secret, every omission, every hidden betrayal would be exposed. The road's judgment was methodical, precise, and eternal. Greyford itself was a ledger, each resident bound to witness, each soul tethered to the unfolding reckoning. Clara turned to him, voice low but commanding. Recognition is survival. Accept what rises, acknowledge it, or be consumed. Twice. Write it twice, in your mind, in your soul. Lock it in. Elias felt the weight of her words embed themselves into his consciousness. The road's revelation was absolute, unstoppable, and inescapable. It was no longer merely a path. It was a force, a living intelligence, a reflection of human sin made tangible. The names continued to push from the earth, silver rain catching each one, glinting like frozen judgment. Elias realized the full, terrible truth. Survival did not mean escape. It meant acknowledgement, endurance, and transformation. The town would never be the same, and neither would he. Ironcross Road had claimed its reckoning. Dawn never came as Elias Marrow expected. Instead, a gray pall lingered over Greyford, thick and oppressive, as if the town itself had been hollowed out by the night's revelation. Ironcross Road stretched before him, empty yet alive, the silver rain having slowed to a fine mist that hovered over the letters still etched in the mud. The names of the living, the dead, the hidden, all glimmered faintly, eternal and undeniable, the judgment complete. Elias felt the weight of the entire ledger pressing down, every secret exposed, every sin accounted for, and every consequence fulfilled. Clara stood beside him, quiet but unwavering. "It is done," she whispered. Her voice held the authority of someone who had seen beyond the veil, who understood the patterns no one else could. Elias realized that she had become more than a witness. She had become the embodiment of the road's intelligence, the living proof that knowledge and judgment had merged. Through her, he had seen the depth of Ironcross Road's memory, the meticulous precision of its measure, and the absolute inevitability of its revelations. The tapping had ceased, leaving a heavy silence that carried its own menace. Yet Elias could feel it still, in the soil, in the air, in his own chest. The road had not abandoned its purpose. It had merely completed this cycle. Every secret laid bare, every hidden debt revealed, every name risen from the soil. Yet the lesson remained. Concealment was temporary, judgment eternal. The townspeople, those who had survived to witness, would carry this knowledge in silence, forever marked by what had been revealed. Elias knelt and traced a finger over his own name, etched with impossible precision. It was no longer merely letters in mud. It was a sentence, a verdict, a transformation. He understood that Ironcross Road was not merely a path, but a force that demanded acknowledgement, a living ledger that reshaped those who dared approach it. Knowledge had become a burden heavier than life, and yet, to recognize it fully was the only path to survival. Clara's gaze held his, steady, almost solemn. "You are changed now," she said softly. "The road's truth has entered you. You will never be the same, nor can you pretend. Remember, recognition is survival, and survival is transformation." Elias realized she spoke the ultimate lesson, that some knowledge could never be unlearned, and some truths could never be ignored. To walk Ironcross Road was to become part of its record, to bear witness, and to carry its judgment forward, eternally. The mist lifted slowly, revealing the quiet town, still and hollow, its people forever altered, its secrets laid bare. The silver rain had ceased, yet its memory lingered, a reminder that Ironcross Road was eternal, patient, and unyielding. And Elias, transformed, knew that once a man had walked its path, once he had seen its truths, there could be no return. The road had claimed its reckoning, and all who touched it were forever bound. The names remained in the soil, glinting faintly in the morning light, a silent testament. Conceal nothing, for the road will remember, and its judgment is eternal. The journey is complete, but the road never ends.